Okay, so let's apply that to our actual sim. We'll go back over here where we're doing all our other constraint stuff. We're actually just going to do it separately than what we did here already, and we'll just kind of add it into our constraints thing here at the end. So how do we want to do this? I would say one thing we want to do right up front is we don't want to have this whole structure up here to be glued to this thing down here. So what I think will be a cool way to do this is we'll take this and I'm going to say, let's make a split. Let's just build the constraints in two separate passes. And I'll say, these guys here, they're going to be separate. So let's just have a split and we'll have both of these things make constraints just to ensure that they're not connected. So I'm going to say, I'll show you what we're doing here in a second. I'm saying basically take the bottom stuff, do your thing, and then do that. So now the bottom made all of its constraints, the top made all of its constraints in the normal fashion. Oops, they're actually both connected to the same thing. My bad. So the top made its constraints like this, bottom made its constraints like this, and now they're back together, but they're not. So now there's nothing that actually is connecting the top area to the bottom. So that's pretty good. So now they're not, so now there's definitely no glues holding it back. You could have also, I guess, just technically just deleted any connections you saw arbitrarily, but I think this is cleaner. So let's say split out rotors, like that. So now that we've done that, let's go over here and say, I want to connect this thing to one of the pieces in here. And it's kind of hard to see right now with this. So a common technique I would say that I like to do is this visibility thing. Visibility is cool. I'm going to say, let's hide this thing. There. So now we don't see it. It's still there. It's not deleted. So I just can't see it for a moment. So what I'm going to actually do, I'm going to isolate this thing, or rather, not even that thing. I only want to isolate this actual piece here. And I want to find some piece that's more or less underneath it. So maybe like you. Maybe you. Oops. Do that one. Cool. So delete them. Delete not selected. So now we have this. And we still know what they are by their names, which is fine. So that's still stored there and everything. And I'm going to make a line between the two of them, much like we always do. The difference here being is I need to be careful. I want my constraint line to be straight up and down through this thing. So I'm going to say, let's make an add. Add does everything. Add's gonna, in our case, we're gonna delete this stuff, but just keep the two dots here. I'm gonna make a line between them like this. So now we have our line. We still have our names. And I'm actually gonna do something terrible, which is I'm just gonna move this over. I'm literally gonna drag this and move it under this thing. I'm gonna go to magnet to point. Just point to that guy. Magnet to point this way. There. So now I know I have a line that's straight up and down, connecting the two guys there. Close enough. So now I know I'm centered under it. We could do the usual thing where we condense it down into the middle with this thing. And I need to give it my usual primitive wrangle treatment where I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it constraint name equals twist and constraint type equals all. Just like with the hard constraint, the cone twist in many ways is related to the hard constraint. We wanted to do both rotation and position for this. I'll call this Rang twist. So now we have it. We just have our constraint. We don't even need to bother with the rest of this. We don't need to process it and interpret it and unique it and scale it down. We did all those things already. So all I'm going to do is just merge it in. And there you go. And we'll actually also make sure that the rest length is 0. It probably would have been initialized to 0 anyway, but let's be explicit about it. So there it is. So it's there and ready. Cool. And now we can go into our sim here. And I'm going to add a cone twist to this. We'll just call it twist. That's all I care about. And I believe we called it twist. And I want to make sure it's set up correctly, so I'm going to hide some of these other things that we have around. Let's see. So we don't see anything because I believe I have everything turned off here. What we want is that red. So there it is. And in order to make sure that we know that we're doing everything right, I'm going to turn the display off for the ground. I'm going to just literally turn off these other constraints. And we have this origin gnomon here, which if you press D, you can bring up the display panel. I'm going to get rid of this origin gnomon just so I'm not confused. We never use it anyway. So here's our cone thing in its default look. Same thing, you know, we can get a cone thing out here. We don't want it to do that. Remember what we said before. We want, first of all, to point up. So change this to an up vector, and this should be the same up vector. Change this to some perpendicular vector, and same thing. Change this up to some perpendicular vector. Cool. Now we don't care about these, so I'm just going to put these to 0. The twist is the only thing we really do care about. The twist goes all the way to 180. Great. And so now we're sure that we have it. This straight up and down line will be what it rotates around. This is the pointing to the, because it's constraining two pieces together. This is the piece from the roof. That's why it's off to the side a little bit. Great. So that should do it. We should be pretty confident that that will do it. And now we can just run it and see if we notice that it's working much more interestingly now. We shouldn't see it get stuck anymore. And close this, and here's hoping. And there we go. And it did. It worked perfectly. We can see it if we slow it down, especially. See how the rotors are spinning. They're still spinning even after it hits. It's still spinning. See how it's still, the momentum is still there. It's still going the right way. And then eventually, obviously, it's just destroyed, so it doesn't matter anymore. But the important thing is that it didn't freeze up. Eventually, it just breaks apart because of the various glue constraints. We're only controlling this spinning disc thing on the bottom here. Everything else is glued to it, so we can't control what happens after that. But it will remain constrained to that thing. You can see it following it there. That's that little green piece there. It will stick basically with it for the whole time. And there it is. See how it's moving with it? We can have it break through the same way. It means that we have the hard constraints break, which you might want to do. To be technically accurate, you probably should. But for now, this is fine. Cool. So it's getting very complex. We're getting a lot of really interesting motion. Because this is all procedural, you can always just up the amount of fractured pieces there are, and everything will just propagate down. But I think that is enough for the cone twist for now. Any kind of hinges, though, any kind of spinning things, a lot of mechanical stuff can be done with the cone twist constraint. Awesome.